Welcome back to another guide, and today I'm going to be talking about bursting, and I have a few reasons for doing that, but this is your general, maybe even definitive guide to bursting. And why do we make a guide about bursting? Because people don't know how to burst apparently, and bursting is a key part of your gameplay. Like, bursting is a very important resource, and being able to burst correctly is vital. So let's talk about first of all, what are the benefits of bursting? The most obvious benefit of bursting is, well, look, this is what it looks like when you don't have burst. Not pretty, definitely not pretty. So if you don't have burst, this is 60% of my life gone and positive bonus for the opponent. Compared to me having burst, welcome back to a neutral situation basically. So this is one of the very obvious things, you know, preventing damage, preventing your opponent from getting an advantage. The other thing is, for many characters, Melee and Testament are a perfect example, they don't really have a viable reversal. This super is okay, so is this one, but they aren't exactly great, and we really, you know, we're looking for other things to use because we need our meter for, you know, in Melee's case for some mix-ups and for extensions, in Testament's case for being able to control space and other stuff like that. And because we don't have a meterless reversal, we usually end up relying on our burst to save us, as a, for example, a reversal here. Either in the form of a gold burst or a regular burst, like over here. So it can be used as a reversal as well. And those are the main things that you're going to be using it for. Now, bursts, let's talk about using the burst itself correctly. When to burst and when to not burst. The first thing is, if you can win without bursting, then you should probably not burst. So for example, in a scramble like this was mostly fine. Let me set the dummy to block after the first hit, yeah, that's nice. So you see how the situation is still fine for Melee here. This is not too bad to be a position, like for example here, this is absolutely winnable, right? All she really needs to do is get around and turn the tables on like this, for example. And from Testament's point of view, this is also again a winnable position, right? And if you can win without bursting, then you should probably not burst. You want to save it. If, however, you are put in a position that's really checkmate in a way, in a position where, for example, we were both all health, and I get a big hit, let's say counter hit like this, this is a good time to burst, right? Because the next combo is going to deal so much damage that you're not going to win unless you burst here, right? Your chances of surviving here are really slim. So Emilia then would want to burst immediately, so she can keep kind of her chance to win, right? So she doesn't lose it, in a way. That's one. The other thing, as I said, is the reversal. When you don't have other options, for example, against Nago's main mix-up is either strike or throw, right? So it makes sense to use Gold Burst to get him off of you, because it will beat the mix-up. Any situation where you really don't want to guess, any situation that, you know, you have a decent amount of advantage, let's say, you know, I was able to push Melee all the way over here, and then she just happens to poke me, happens to get some random ass hit here, and, you know, it kinda makes sense to wanna burst here in a situation like this and to avoid, you know, losing your advantage, to keep it. And this is especially true, you know, around here it's whatever, you know, I was having an advantage, I poked out it, so I might burst, I might not burst, it's fine. But over here near the corner, like it's very common to like be doing fine, you know, get something like this going. And the next thing you know, she kinda gets up, she hits you or something, and you just like burst immediately. And the reason why bursting in a situation like this is fine, because if I mess up, I was going for a meaty. Bursting here is fine because I get to keep the corner. So I maintain my positional advantage and I can continue applying my pressure, right? So bursting in this situation is also fine. Now when not to burst, first of all is look at what hits you burst. For example, bursting a coal swash is a really dumb idea. Why? Because if you burst a coal swash, oops, look at that. Or let's say, I think this would work. Let's say. You see that? This is also another move that you should not burst. So generally, the less options your opponent has, the less likely they are to find a way to beat your burst. Therefore, the more you so for example, if I get hit by this, there's practically no reason not to burst, right? So Milia comes here, she's doing some mix, she does this. There is literally nothing, unless she has meter, she literally cannot do anything to stop my burst here. So it's fine to burst in a way, like you burst will never be punished here, right? So you want to be looking for spots like that. Another good example is 6p. Like if she hits you with a 6p, like what is she going to do after? She practically has no options. There's not much she can do, so bursting here, absolutely fine. A good choice. But Qual Swashes, once again, Qual Swashes, 5Ks, these are buttons that have a lot of options after them, right? Same goes for actually for 5P and 2P. The reason why I don't want to burst this move is because it's super easy to make it safe. Look at that. Right? So you want to measure the risk and reward and you want to find options from your opponent that are easy to burst in the sense that they cannot really do much about your burst, if that makes sense. Also, the rule of you should not burst if you can win without bursting, you applies especially when you're down around or you're up around. If you're up around, if you can manage to save your burst, then you have a burst for your next round. So the chances of winning, even if you lose after, if you lose in the next round, so when you both have one life, you have a pretty decent chance to win, especially if they have used their burst and you haven't yet. And in the same way, if you're down around, you really want to try to win without using burst. Because if you can win without using burst, then you probably will have burst for the next round and you'll be fine. You can also play it in the reverse way, and if you are down around, you might want to burst immediately after. The first chance available to burst. The reason for this is because if you play the rest of the round well enough, your burst should be able to build back up. So you kinda get to burst, so you get a second chance, but also you have a pretty decent chance of actually having your burst back in the next round. And that generally is it when it comes to bursting. Now, playing around burst. Actually, you know what? Let's talk about gold burst. When is it a good idea to gold burst? First of all, when you run out of options, you should use burst in the sense that burst shouldn't be your first option. Burst should be your second or even third option, depending on what your character plays like. So, for example, let's say. What did I use to burst bait before? I think I did this. What would be better? No, let's go like this. Right. God damn it. God damn it. Let's try it like this. I didn't record it. Ah, fuck me. Okay, let's see. So, if in this situation I burst, my burst gets baited, I get hit by this and I die, right? But if I did YRC, for example, I'm fine. And even if I do get hit, here, I still have my burst to back me up, if that makes sense, right? The same way, if you have meter, you know, why not do this as a reversal, right? But I'm going to get it, it's fine. Ah, what's the time on this? There we go, this should be fine. So, do super first. Because now when she hits you, what do? You burst. And you're fine, right? But if you did burst first, right? Now you have nothing. And you just hit a combo. So that makes sense, right? Now for Goldbursting, the first rule to Goldbursting is... if you're going to use Goldburst as a reversal or whatever, make sure you don't have leftover meter. Because if you're going to lose your burst in an attempt to you know, make your opponent get off of you and get a chance to fight again, you don't really want to have meter left over, because if you have leftover meter, that means that you're losing a lot of the reward you actually get from Goldburst, you know. You're going to get 50, or maybe you're not even going to be able to get 100 meter from it. And you're losing a burst. Also, because it's such a risky thing and because burst is so important, it's crucial to make sure you get the maximum possible reward of your gold burst, e.g. doing it when you have no meter. And that's that, more or less. Now let's talk about playing around burst. So you need to consider when your opponent wants to burst and what are their burst habits. So for example, there are people who you can immediately spot. Oh, actually, no, before that, there's another important principle that I forgot. Always give yourself a second chance. That might sound weird, but for example, I'd rather... let me remove the blocking. No block. So... this is a good example. Right, so... do not burst here. Instead, why not burst here? Like, if you fail to block the mix-up... oh no, burst now. Because you never know, maybe, you know, maybe you're going to get lucky, you're going to get the return, well, you just got a punish, right? And so you have saved your burst, and you got decent damage, and you know, you avoided the problem, you know, you actually were able to block them. So give yourself a chance, you know? Don't burst here, like, why would you burst here? Give yourself a chance to block the follow-up. And if you're successful, like, good on you, right? You should give yourself chances. Right, okay, now dealing with burst. So playing around burst usually revolves around baiting, and there are a lot of ways to bait. The simplest one is soft baiting. And soft baiting means that you're just going to go for routes that are burst safe generally. You're going to go for burst safe options. So you're not going to call out the burst, you're just going to keep it in mind as you play. For Testament, that would mean, you know, instead of going for a normal combo route, let's say, can I get Stain? Character specific. Stain. I'm going to say that let me count. 1, 2, 3 on the third hit. Yeah. Blue burst on the third hit. So let's say I get a hit like this. So this is a normal combo route, right? But I get bursted. So instead of going for this route, which let me show you what the route looks like. So instead of going for this optimal route here, which is very optimal, I can choose to go for this route. Oops. Obviously the reward here is way lower, right? So I sacrificed a lot of my damage. But in doing so, I've actually done something different. Look at that. I've kept myself bursty. I have baited the burst. So by sacrificing a little bit of damage, I create a situation where my opponent just cannot burst. I can probably get a bigger punish, but whatever. And this can be done in many ways, right? You don't have to be doing 6p for this. It depends on the characters. For example, with Testament, I might prefer to go for... Let's see... If we remove the stain, first of all. Stain... let's set... Let me get a counter hit. So usually we go for this route, right? But maybe, just maybe, you can go for this route. Something like that. This is the big hit that gets you bursted. What else can you do? Let me think, maybe the third hit is a better example. The combo usually goes like this. That's bursted. Right. I really don't know. If I was playing Nago, this would be very easy to demonstrate, but however, just changing your routes ever so slightly. Here into Crow. Yeah, this is a good example, let's go. This into Crow, into run up swing. There we go. Whatever. Whatever, you get the idea, right? If you change the way you structure your combos, or your pressure, or whatever, really you can create a situation where the burst is just not a good option. You're going to sacrifice something. You know what is a great example of this? If I set my opponent to walk. You know what's a great example of this? Save jumps. By picking a save jump, you deny your opponent the ability to Goldburst. It's the same idea. You might not want save jump, right? For example, with Testament here, maybe this is a better reward. But this won't keep me burst safe, right? Compared to choosing a save jump, which will. So that's that, I guess. The other way to, you know, in the routing, the pseudo, the soft burst bait would be to pick just ranges, for example, and moves that are burst safe when you do stuff. So instead of choosing to hit with close swaps, maybe I'll choose to hit with 5k. Because 5k, if they burst, I need to be a bit. If they burst this, compared to, oh, maybe it's not safe. Right, so 5k. There we go. Or instead of choosing to approach with 5k, I might choose to just do this. Look at that. Instead of doing this and getting bursted, I can instead go move like this. It keeps me further away. And the same goes for the follow-ups, right? Instead of doing a follow-up like... Let's say, instead of doing something like this, I might opt to do something like this. So if they happen to burst, which will be the very first hit here, I'm fine, right? Again, just soft baiting. Now hard baiting, you need to call out the burst. There are safer methods of doing it, there are riskier methods of doing it. They all work, they are all fine. So a hard bait would be exactly the doing a move to bait the burst and just baiting the burst. And just getting a hit like this and just waiting. This is me hard baiting. So if melee here doesn't burst and I don't block the burst, you can kinda just answer back, you know, and then screw. Right, so I've dropped whatever pressure I was doing or whatever combo I was doing specifically to call out the burst. And if it doesn't come, well, I'm fucked. Right? It was a hard bait. Same goes for this. This is a burst bait. But if she doesn't burst, the situation is kind of bad. Right. Now it could lead to some very awkward things like that. So jump cancel on normals. This is a very easy bait. You can jump back. I usually choose to jump forward because it makes punishing burst easier. So if the melee player here chooses burst, you can bait and then punish. Like this. We already mentioned this one. What other hard baits? The meter bait. So if you wanna bait a burst ever, but you don't have a move that's cancelable, so for example I cannot bait it from this range with this move, I cannot jump, I cannot do anything, you can always just do this. And this is really nice. Because it gives you a lot of time to react and see what's happening. Usually when you would want to do it, so remember how I talked about how they shouldn't burst. Yeah. How you don't want to, oh they burst. How you don't want to burst the call swash because there are a lot of options after it that may allow your opponent to bait your burst. And how you should burst options like this that have no options or very little options after with which they can interact with the burst. Well, this is a good place to bait like that. So if I get clipped by this and I burst because I know it's a bad option, this is a very easy bait for the melee player. Oh no! The way you know if they've bursted or not, if you notice, look what happens when I don't burst. Look at how Testament lifts up immediately after they get hit, right? Which you can compare to when I burst. Oops. You can spot the animation, but if I delay it and you don't see the animation, notice how she doesn't, the Testament doesn't lift up after the flash, you know, when the red wave shows up. This means that they have bursted, right? They weren't hit by the flash, so they must have done something. In this case, a burst. Now, that's baiting with meter. Do we have other forms of hard baiting? I'm just thinking about it. They really aren't. So, when you go out to bait a burst, first of all, consider your opponent's bursting habits. Because if you know when and how they like to burst, then you have a good chance of actually catching a burst. And if you're going to go out of your way to catch a burst, first of all, consider, you know, if it's worth it or not. For example, you know, I gave the example of the counter hit here, right? If I get this counter hit, I really don't want to bait a burst here. I really do not. Because look at this damage. Fuck, come on, I'm going to get it. Look at this situation. Honestly, if I happen to bait a burst, what does this look like? What do you think this looks like? It might look like this, or it might look like this. Look at how much damage I just lost, right? And because of that, for example, off a hit like this, I would never burst bait. I would never burst bait. Because if I burst bait, like, the reward is horrible. The reward is nothing compared to what I would have gotten otherwise, right? So judge, use this kind of reward focus mentality to judge whether baiting something is good or not. When you want to go for the most baits is when everything kills, usually, because if everything is going to kill, then they either burst or they do not burst. And if you're right, you're always going to get the best possible rewards, which is winning the round. If you're wrong, then you're wrong. they burst, you know they lose burst, whatever, you're back in neutral, or you bait and they do not burst, and you just get to keep your momentum, you know, and you try to, you guess again, basically. So these are the ins and outs of bursting, more or less. Pick up your character, experiment, see what you can do when it comes to playing around burst, but also when the next time you play, think about all these little mentalities and, you know, these tips, giving yourself a chance, bursting only when it requires you to win, right? If you can win only by bursting, bursting when you're not up around, stuff like that. Bursting to keep your advantage is a good example, and also focus on bursting good, you know, finding good burst points, you know, moves that are not close rushes, that are not 5Ks, that don't have many follow-up options and stuff like that. I wish you luck in your future endeavors, and I hope this was helpful.